Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Big Home Ed Conversations. My name's Kelly Rigg. I'm a home ed mum of two, founder of Off-Roading Motherhood, and a qualified mindset coach. I'm passionate about supporting parents and neurodivergent families as they transition to home education from mainstream schooling. And I'm here together, as always, with my co-host, Ashley Venerio. She's a fellow home ed mum of three and a former primary teacher. So we created the Big Home Ed Conversations podcast with what began as honest, heartfelt talks around her coffee table, and basically it's now grown into a space where hundreds of listeners now tune in for real, unfiltered conversations about mindset, behaviour challenges, educational philosophies, and the often emotional journey of alternative education. So we try to cut through the noise and focus on what really matters to home educating families, offering clarity, confidence, and community, we hope, in every episode. Now, this week is centred around prejudice within the home educating community. Now, that in itself, I appreciate, is going to be quite a triggering concept. And whilst there'll be lots of you listening who will maybe feel reasonably defensive about some of the things that we may end up touching on today, and there'll be lots of people who might be listening who are experiencing some of this prejudice and maybe do feel quite othered and are finding it hard to integrate into groups and communities that are already established. What we are asking you to do when we are talking about this stuff is simply to take an opportunity to consider what some of your biases might be. What maybe some of the things, maybe if you do relate to any of it, or you do find yourself feeling that kind of slight defensiveness against some of it, is to think about why that feeling is there, but whether or not that actually means that maybe there is something to it, that we need to try and work on that maybe that's something that we are thinking about other people about, we're thinking that about them rather. And maybe we do need to think about why we have that opinion, where that's coming from, who's influenced that belief in us, and how that's showing up for you in your relationships. And realistically, just trying to remember that as a home educating community, we have all got our own individualities, and that's kind of the beauty of it. And we definitely want to preserve that individualness as much as humanly possible. Now, there's lots of different elements to this, and we kind of found ourselves, as we've been kind of planning and thinking about what we're going to talk about in this episode, there's an awful lot of different areas to it. You've got method, you've got the ideological or philosophical divides, you've got perceptions of doing it right, doing it the right way, socioeconomic and cultural prejudice, there's sort of veteran versus newcomer attitudes, there's all kinds of different divides within the home educating community. So we're going to try and sort of systematically work through it, and have a conversation about some of the things that we've experienced, and ultimately where we are working on our biases as well, and how we're noticing that we're showing up in the thoughts that we sometimes find ourselves having, and actually what we're trying to work on, because you're not alone. If you find yourself feeling this way sometimes, if you listen to any of what we say today and you feel like actually this is something which you feel sometimes, you're not alone. But ultimately we do all have a responsibility to try and remember that individual is what we're actually going for, and that does mean that we're going to have very different beliefs and approaches and ideas, and that actually that is the whole point, in my opinion anyway, of what home education is supposed to be about. This kind of lifestyle is creating this incredible, diverse, interesting community of individuals who've got such fascinating approaches and loves and curiosities that ultimately lead to innovation and ideas and lots of wisdom as well. So we thought we'd start in that kind of order, really. Method first. This is a sticky point. So Ashley, not that long ago, experienced a moment in a social circle, basically. So I'll kind of explain, we're going to both kind of explain a little bit kind of about our ethos and how we do things. But she tends to follow kind of sort of find really great curriculums and ideas that her kids have got, and she builds on stuff and does a lot of learning at home with them. And I tend to be quite project-based, a little bit unschooly, tend to kind of follow my own like random eclectic. It just kind of like builds itself randomly over time. They'll touch on a topic and then we'll go off on a detour and we'll learn about that for a while, and then I'll realize that it's waned and everyone's just pretending to be a dog or like wanting to be a pet or something again. I'm like, okay, but that's fine, you can do that to some degree, but like we've clearly lost an interest in a subject, so I might try and like plant an idea or gently guide it in a direction. But it does tend to be quite relaxed. It tends to be quite meandery. I let subjects drop when they stop showing an interest in it. We've kind of covered a fair amount of it. I'll just let it go. I'm not too worried about completion or feeling like we've got to have done everything there is to do in that subject or everything that I've prepared or planned for it. I'm okay if I prepare stuff and they don't have any interest in doing it. It just kind of gets filed away as an idea for a later day. We might plan some days out, and if they're not particularly engaged with it, then we'll just take from it what we take from it, and we just try and have some fun along the way. And so I do tend to be quite unschooly. I do try and allow them to kind of get to ideas on their own. But I do also offer some sort of teaching. And I do sit down and I do give them guidance, and I get my little tiny whiteboard out and we draw stuff out on it, and I explain stuff to them, and I try to help them understand things, and they're quite receptive to that. But the point is, this is my family and these are my kids and this is how we work, and how I like to learn and how they like to learn and the kinds of things we like to learn about is entirely unique to who we are. So I'll let Ashley do the same for her. Like, what is it that kind of like you guys do to build your structure at home? Like, what is your kind of structure?
We rely heavily on books. So storybooks, reference books, tons of literature. It has been the best way for us to engage and learn about a topic while also sort of sneaking in the grammar and even then writing components
Mm-hmm.
to a curriculum. But we absolutely follow a more, so I say this, but we do dovetail into other things. But I would say we're definitely a little more structured. So I do purchase the curriculum. Even if we're not doing it in the book, like if we sort of take the learning off the page, I'm still referencing
Mm-hmm.
curriculum. And I don't have just one, I have so many, and I pull from all of them to some degree. So I would say that the only thing that we follow, just one solid curriculum, and then maybe I supplement into it with other types of activities or worksheets. And don't cringe at the word worksheets, they're fun, is math.
We do
So
worksheets. We absolutely do the odd one. Yeah.
I saw the funniest meme where it was like my homeschool child completing one worksheet, and he was like on the ground moaning, and it was like just the effort to do one worksheet.
Oh,
But yeah,
don't. We've definitely
so
been there.
I I know in the homeschool community worksheet is like a 4-letter word, but yeah, so I think math is sort of one of the things where it took us a while to find the right path for it. And this particular curriculum works really well. And so we were going to continue with it. And it's so funny because I feel like homeschoolers, particularly around math and probably every subject, when you talk about it, they're like, oh, but you could do this, and then they'll just naturally learn this, and then this will happen. And I get it. I get that that works for a lot of other families and children, but I firmly believe in math as another language
Mm.
and how it activates a part of the brain that is really crucial for decision making and just
Mm.
a
Logic,
general
puzzles, and deciphering and decoding.
100%. And
Mm.
if you can get yourself to the level of doing like calculus, that is absolutely, your brain has learned another language.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know the benefits of that. So I do think that math is really important, not because you're ever going to be using, maybe geometry or algebra in the future in your day to day as you're shopping at the grocery store, but those components do activate a part of your brain that I think is very important. And I do think yeah, it's a critical thinking. It's a logic. It's just
Mm.
a process. I think it's important. So for us, having a really
Yeah.
strong math foundation is important because
Yeah.
if you can do all that well, it makes other things easier down the road. So that is one thing that I'm not saying it's a hill I'm going to die on, but for my kids, it probably is. And for other families, they can choose not to do that. And that is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So math is when we do, but the rest of it, history, science, I try to make as exciting as possible. I try to ensure that we're using lots of really good literature and exciting books. I know, obviously, in the Montessori world, they talk about living books really strongly. I absolutely look at reading lists and all of that to kind of do it. So I would say we
Yeah.
are more of a curriculum based, but that definitely is facilitated by myself in pulling things off the page, in creating different unit studies, in meshing together curriculums in a way that lets us kind of go down a rabbit hole if we want to
Yeah.
and really focus on something. So yeah. And a lot of that, I think the more important piece of this too, that people sometimes don't consider when they're looking at a more structured curriculum family, I would say, is why that's the case. So my husband is still very critical of home education. it is not something he is 100% on board with. And so I have to be respectful of that. Like, I'm not getting
Mm.
divorced to homeschool, right? So I have to compromise somewhere. It is just the nature of relationships. And
Yeah.
that is something that he has 100%, thankfully, deferred to me on and not fought me on
Mhm.
much. So, um, it's definitely an opinion of his that school is there for a reason, and
Mhm.
he will absolutely say that he is not looking into it beyond that. So it's just there's no questioning of like, why does school exist and how did we get here and
Mm.
what is the true reason? Like, he doesn't care about that. His is
No.
more of like, this is what people do. And so,
Mhm.
we wake up in the morning, we go to work, we go to school, we come home at night. Like, that is
Yeah.
where he is, and that's fine. And
Mhm.
plenty of families are like that. Most of families are like that. For him, this is the world that our children live in,
Yeah.
and they have to exist in it. And he doesn't want them to feel outside of the norm. He doesn't want them to feel weird. He doesn't want them to feel out of place. And so
Yeah.
that's sort of, it's still a caring reason that
Yeah.
he's coming to that,
Yeah.
right? It's just, he's very conscious of that.
Yeah.
And so we have to work together. And so part of that is creating an environment where if something were to happen, if something were to change, if I had to go back to work full time, if something
Mm.
dramatically changed in our lifestyle, which we all know these things happen. The economy is crazy. COVID was a
Yeah.
great example of how something outside of our control could impact
Mhm.
our daily life. If he lost his job, any of that stuff, it would mean perhaps that our kids would have to go back into a traditional school environment. And in that way, we wouldn't want them to feel behind. I would
No.
hate it if my kids were forced to have such a big change and then on top of it, feel like
Yeah.
they were less than all of their peers.
Yeah.
So that is sort of just the reality of the world that we live in.
Mhm.
Do I wish it was different? Absolutely. But this is the world we live in. So there's just no guarantee.
I think we also have to think as well that the reason why people get funny about this or worry about it, I suppose, is this concept that certain ways of doing education, offering education, could be detrimental to the child. And I think what we have to think about here is truly what is detrimental to a child's education. Typically, it's poverty, lack of resource, lack of opportunity. Like we're talking a child who's obviously dealing with malnutrition, who has not got supportive parents, who's not got a good home environment. Like there's an awful lot of pushback in the government at the moment, obviously, around getting these breakfast clubs in place and after school clubs in place and making sure that no child starts the day hungry and all the rest of it, all this like nonsense that they're spouting. And actually what it is a plaster that's covering the fact that actually a lot of families are really struggling to provide a to provide breakfast, to have the time to spend with their children because they've all got to rush off to school and actually nobody can afford for the breakfast clubs and they can't, whatever, right? So like
Yeah,
there's a whole thing around that right now. And ultimately, what's truly detrimental to a child's education is really a lack of interest from the parties involved in that child's education and that child not being in an optimal position to thrive and grow. Now, a child who's being provided a curriculum and an intentional parent who's researching ideas based on topics they love and enjoy. Like I know that you have researched classes and curriculums and have changed their maths around to be around horses and like all the things that you've done to help benefit their interests,
yeah,
like what they are interested in. You have used that to help them to do the core skills that we know are considered essential in our community, like in social normative communities. And that ultimately, those core skills are things that allow them to progress into being able to digest information from different sources and allows them to understand statistics and to be able to take data and process it. Like we know that those core learning skills, like the ability to learn, the ability to take on these bits of
exactly.
information, are
Yeah.
basically, for me, if I really boil down what my home ed is all about, it's not actually about retaining all the information I give them. It's not about like when we do a
Oh,
history topic that I want them to remember all those dates and make sure they can do me a paper on it. What I want them to be able to do is to A, find it interesting, B, be reasonably engaged, and to actually want to learn it in the first place. So that's obviously got to then therefore pique their interest in some way, which is always the tricky
exactly.
part. It needs to be offering them a chance to learn skills of how to learn. And then also then
The
ultimately
biggest part.
allows them to have the opportunity to then learn whatever they want. So they'll retain some bits and some bits will get discarded because our brains only keep what's relevant to us, right? And ultimately, I'm not planning on testing them on everything that we do. We do the odd little fun quiz. They love a quiz, to be honest. They're a bit weird like that. My son brings me the whiteboard and says, Mummy, can you do me a maths test? I don't even know where he gets it from. It's not like I've ever presented him with a maths test in his life, but he just, can you give me a maths test? I blame YouTube. Blame YouTube for everything. But anyway, the point is that we have to think, like, when we're finding ourselves sitting there going, those poor kids, like, that parent's doing school at home, like, they're not going out to the park. They're not, well, they are going out to the park. I'm not saying yours aren't, but like when we sit there and go, oh, are they literally just at home all the time? Are they just sat at the dining room table having to write pages and pages and pages? Or are they doing loads and loads of workbooks when they could just be playing with things? And, oh, it's so much better if they're outside doing it and all the rest of it, right? We've really got to stop and look at this and think, right, what is truly detrimental to a child's education? Is it having it provided in a way which, if the child is engaged in and functioning well within and progressing well and has plenty of time to socialize, plenty of time to do what they love doing, like, they're out of the park, they're moving their bodies, they're learning in nature as well, they're doing all the other fun stuff as well, but they are also just having a bit of that time at home, doing that concentrated effort at the table, whatever, it's fine. Like, this is great even. And it's like, ultimately, if a parent doesn't like to do any of that kind of sit down at home stuff with them at the table, that's equally fine. That child, like, if you're paying attention to that child's developmental growth and you're observing what they're learning and you're noticing where they're going with something and you're gently scaffolding and supporting and structuring something, like, you're going to be providing something, whether that's simply just making sure they get plenty of outdoor time or giving them an opportunity to chat to a conservationist if they're really interested in the forest and how to take care of it. You know what I mean? Like, you're,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you're providing a book and a worksheet or you're providing a class or you're providing an outdoor activity or a drop-off setting or a forest school or whatever it is you end up providing, we're all doing the same thing. Just
Yes.
doesn't always look like a book, or it doesn't always look like a table. Sometimes it can look like something else. But the key is that by understanding that we each provide a different, slightly different method, doesn't mean we're actually working towards different things. Like, somewhat
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah. Like, some of us are maybe kind of like super focused on mental well-being and energies and lots of outdoor time and connecting with nature and getting back to our human roots, and they will prioritize those things. And beautiful, because those kids will hopefully turn into our future conservationists and environmental champions and the people who will make incredible things happen around that, right? Even in a little way. And you're
Yeah.
going to have kids who are super academic because they naturally love books and they love digesting information, get super deep into a topic and they want to know everything there is to know fact-wise about it and will be super, super, super focused on that kind of side of things. Or they'll become an incredible mathematician and they love to play with numbers and logic puzzles and are super immersed in that. And I mean, it's obvious what I'm getting at here. Each of those kids is going to have an incredible impact on our human culture. Like, all of them will. And so it's okay to follow them in whichever direction makes sense. And I think we just have to try and remember that just because we might be super naturey and want to be outdoors a lot, that it doesn't mean that somebody providing a more sort of, well, as they refer to it, school at home, but it's not school. Like, it's not the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
sure, okay, there will be some people out there who have taken their kids out of school, provide maybe an online school that they attend every day, that they do the same subjects, they will work towards the same qualifications, that they will do school, but just at home in a different environment. But even just that is a hugely different experience for a child. That will mean that that child obviously is maybe taken away from an environment there was lots of bullying, or where they weren't happy, or they weren't feeling very supported, or the teachers weren't great, or the parent didn't have enough oversight on what was being taught to them, and that child wasn't able to handle that curriculum. And now that parent can support that child individually with getting to their goals. Like, it's so different to
Yeah.
being in a school environment. And we just need to stop. I really do feel quite passionately that we need to stop kind of this prejudice around unschooling versus school at home or structured learning, and like the concept of project based or eclectic, or like, oh, you're just meandering wherever you like, versus a curriculum that gives you a steady path to follow. There's no right or wrong here. Like, there's lots of information to pull from, right? There's loads of philosophers out there, loads of ideas and concepts to pull from. And you've just got to kind of work with what feels good for you and your family and is fun and engaging and allows them to grow and thrive. Like, that's basically all we're trying to do. We're all trying to do the same thing.
I think I was just flabbergasted when this comment was made to me that I don't home educate because I follow a curriculum. Because I, first of all, wasn't even aware that this judgment existed. Like, I never in a million years thought there was someone out there saying, well, she doesn't actually home educate. She's just doing school at home. Like,
Mm.
I was blown away, especially when this conversation happens outside of the home, like at a
Mm.
park or a home ed
Yeah.
meetup. It's sort of like, wait, but what? And
Mm.
it makes me think that there is, and don't get me wrong, I think we all get this way. We all get very focused on what we're doing, and rightfully so. We're raising tiny humans. It is a very big job, whether you homeschool or not.
Mm.
And as a parent, especially in the early years, so much of our focus is on just getting it right for ourselves that we just don't even care what's happening for other families because it's just
Yeah.
there's no capacity for it, right?
No.
But I just think that when we are comparing ourselves and what we're doing in our homeschool to what other families are doing, it's just a recipe for disaster and just an unnecessary stress that we don't need to have. So I was kind of blown away because I'm thinking, well, I actually taught in a school. I didn't do it for years and years and years, but I was there
Mhm.
long enough to absolutely understand that school in the traditional sense, when you send your kids to those four walls, is way more than a curriculum.
Mhm.
And honestly, at the end of the day, if it was just the curriculum, I probably wouldn't have such a big issue with it.
No.
But there is so much more that is happening in terms of classroom management. The kids, being in a room with 30 kids your exact age, and the comparison that comes along with that, the lack of collaboration and motivation,
The
and the
competitiveness, the
bullying, absolutely. The rigidness of it, the lack of ability for your kid to just decide on their own that they have to go pee. Like,
mm.
that to me is absolutely bananas. And I see the apprehension that comes to adults later in life. Okay, can I go to this? Should I go to this? Can I ask this person this question? Oh gosh,
Yeah.
but they're my manager. Like, there's this
Mhm.
power imbalance. Like,
Yeah.
this lack of valuing and your confidence in yourself. And so I think that all of that, and then the
Yes.
social media and everything, that's what I'm
Yeah.
protecting my kids from, right? It's not necessarily about the education for the sake
Yeah.
of learning a topic. It
No.
is the fact that I want my kids to grow up and be really confident and secure in who they are and know how to work together and collaborate and to make compromises and to not judge other people for their decisions because we don't know 90% of their lives. So
No.
I think that is the thing when I think about this comment that was made, that those that follow a stricter curriculum, or any curriculum at all for that matter, aren't home educating. Just like I didn't have a comment.
Mm.
The thing that I guess I want to stress too is that we are also coming here from another country, and
Mm.
what home education looks like in Italy and in the US is
Very
very
different
different.
things.
I would say the unschoolers are the minority in both of
Mm.
those places, whereas here I feel like it is a very prevalent presence.
Mhm.
And I think that's great. I love to see all the ways that these children are learning. And I think as I go through my homeschooling journey, I think the first year, I obviously felt very restricted in having to check these boxes and make sure that my kid was going to be prepared for the exam. Exam is such a strong word, the review at the end of the year. And so I think as the years have gone on, I've found the flexibility, and certainly the joy in
Mm.
following different paths. And I think that I just don't want to see that judgment. I think if we all can just, and this is just one aspect, right? This is just like kind of the homeschool versus home education, or,
Yeah.
that comparison of like, well, I follow Montessori, I follow Waldorf, I follow unschooling,
Exactly,
I
like
follow
Charlotte Mason and all the things, yeah.
100%. Yeah. So like when we look at all of that, yeah, earlier I said Montessori, but it's Charlotte Mason with the living books. Okay.
Hmm.
Anyway, side note. But so as we look at that perspective and what kind of path a homeschooling family tries to follow or could change or mesh together, I just think they're all valid. And
Yes.
like you were saying before, we can't know what's working best for a particular child. And I've spent a lot of time to get to this point and know what works best for my kids and
Yeah.
know that if we do this, we're going to have success. And if we don't, we're going to have tears. That's why we do this, right? Because we're experts in
Yeah.
our kids. We're
Yeah.
the ones that know what's going to work best for them, not some random teacher at the school down the street that they go to just because they live close to it, and not another home ed family for that matter. So yeah, we just don't need it. We're already the minority, right? We need to come together, not create further divide.
Yeah. And I think, like, it's also, you mentioned about sort of unschooling, and as time's gone on, like, you've been able to relax that a bit more, and to see that
Yeah.
progress happens even in places you don't even realize that they're making it. Like, um,
Yes.
my daughter, for example, the other day sat reading on my lap. I was reading them a story off of my phone, and she wanted to read the first paragraph, and she very rarely volunteers to read. So I said yes, and my son was getting very frustrated with the pace. I was like, please stop getting annoyed with her. Like,
No,
this does not
you were this
happen.
way too.
Like, yeah, you were 100% like this once. Like, oh my goodness, please be patient. And she actually really shocked me. I had to make a list afterwards of all the words that she decoded really quickly and managed to say. And she shocked me because her reading up until that point had not been anywhere near that good. And I was like, I'm confused. Like, how are we suddenly reading so well off a screen? That's interesting. Like, I wonder what there is to that. And so I found myself researching it later and finding out that it's something to do with containing text within a small window with no other distractions helps them to stay focused on the
Interesting.
words. But on like a picture book, they're so busy looking at the pictures and then trying to find their place again and looking at the words and then trying to work it out. And like, she does a lot of like logic, like context guessing as she's reading, which is totally fine. This is 6, whatever. Like, she's trying to
Fair
figure it
enough.
out, and she's trying to cheat basically. So she's trying to cheat, but apparently it's a part of a normal developmental process. So it's good. It's fine. Let her do it. But it distracts her. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if I just gave her some little passages of text with nothing else, like a little tiny card that's just got the text on it, whether actually she'd find it a lot easier to focus on decoding it. So it's little moments like that are complete unschooling moments. I'm just reading them a bedtime story and she just fancied doing a bit of the reading. And I've observed something, and now I think, oh, I might have a method here that could help her.
Exactly.
This is like, I am able to trust in the process now because I am nearly 6 years, I don't even know now, completely lost track, at least 5 years in. And I have been watching them progress and grow and learn. And
Yeah.
sure, they do not do it entirely by themselves. Of course, I'm providing some structure and support and scaffolding and guidance and ideas and teaching them stuff and reading books to them and all the things. Like, I am engaged, I am involved and immersed in their learning with them. But ultimately, that is difficult. Unschooling is difficult to get our heads around. We are not trained to be unschoolers in this society. Like, we are trained to be
No.
academics. We are trained to do things how schools do it. And so it's so normal, especially for people who are new to home education, to spend the first few years hung up on the curriculum and worried about how they're providing it and wondering why they can't get their kids to engage with certain types of learning. And so it's okay to support people when they are coming into this community and being like, okay, like, seriously, how do I get my kids to do this? As I had a lady with me talking to me recently saying that she's really struggling, recently deregistered child, not interested in doing any kind of formal learning. And I kind of explained to her why that might be a little bit. And then I said, what does she love? Like, let's drop that for a second. Like, what does she love? And we went into it and I was like, okay, so drawing is symmetry and geometry and fine motor skills and composition and planning and spatial awareness. And like, when you actually start to look at it that way, you're like, so she's like literally doing maths while she's drawing. Yeah, she is. Like,
Yeah.
it's maths. It's a form of maths and all of the things, right? So like color composition, it's science, it's spectrums, it's, yeah, all the things. There's a whole world there of information that is actually pulling together to create an end goal. And sometimes it's messy and sometimes it's chaotic. And sometimes we might look at someone's life and think it looks really chaotic. And we wonder how on earth they get through the day because it just feels really scary for us. But then you throw like neurodivergence into the mix, and you throw all these, like, whatever, right? Age, aptitude, interests, focuses, and it's confusing. And so we cannot judge. We should not judge because there's no reason to judge. Like, children are children and parents are parents and families are families, and they get to do what they want to do, right? So we'll move on from this bit, but you get the idea, guys. This is where we're getting at. This is just not, that's not necessary. There is no doing it right. There is no need for competition. There's no need for
Yeah.
like certain approaches to be considered more successful than others. There's no need, you know what I mean? Like, you can provide ideas, but be mindful that somebody who's got a child who's dyslexic and is struggling to read probably doesn't want to
Exactly.
hear about the fact that your child is reading 10 books a day. And like, we don't have to have any kind
Yeah.
of competition in this. So, I mean, I don't see a lot of competition in the home ed community in that way, but like, do be mindful of this as well, and just be noticing, I guess, that as well, because it can be a tricky one. It's just being mindful that actually they will all meet these developmental goals when they meet them. And it isn't, whatever the school system has decided is the norm doesn't mean that that is actually
Right.
factual or based on any child's psychology or any developmental understanding.
No.
That was just a decision that's been made a lot of the time without very much input, with shocking limited amount of input. So please do not always hold it as the bar to try and leap to. So moving on, there are obviously lots of other things which potentially cause divides within the home ed community and can cause prejudice. And yeah, sort of separating. What's the word I'm looking for here? Like othering.
Yes, exactly.
So you've obviously got things like secular versus religious. So
Hmm.
there is absolutely going to be some level of divide sometimes when it comes to people who have chosen to home educate with faith as their basis for doing so, which I can completely understand, because actually one of the main reasons why the school system was put into place was actually to take the power away from the church. Before schooling began in the UK, in the more the sense that we know it now, run by the government and local authorities, it was actually run by the church. Parents would pay a small amount of money to their local church, who would provide school for the children Monday to Friday, so that they could go to work, or Monday to probably Sunday, I imagine, to be honest,
Yeah.
week long, so they could go to the church and they would learn in the church, and they would learn literacy and numbers, and they would obviously then be out in the fields and supporting their communities, working at the local garage, doing all the things, being involved and supporting, doing stuff as well. But ultimately the local church, was like village hall kind of style schools that you kind of imagine, that was run by the church. The funding came from the church. Parents would be giving money to the church, they were running it. And because the government obviously wanted to get people paying attention to a different belief system, and they wanted them focused on the economy and industry and getting into the cities and going to work, he needed to get some of the power back over the beliefs and the messaging that was coming from the church. And so the government wanted to almost separate itself from the church in that way. And so, of course, you do get church-based schools, like you get a Church of England schools, Catholic schools, etc. And that obviously the church continued to have some part of this, because obviously they already had the structure in place, right? So most communities couldn't eradicate that completely. That ultimately faith was intentionally removed from schools. Cultures were removed from schools. People who were coming to this country, immigrants, etc., that wanted to come and join in with our education, their culture was stripped away from them. They were not expected to come into those schools like advocating for their culture. They were expected to assimilate and to ideally do it from a neutral basis. And obviously what this has meant is, over time, obviously the curriculum has changed and evolved to include things to do with sort of gender and race and all the various different things, that ultimately some of those conversations are not considered okay in very religious kind of faith-based families. And that has obviously meant that they have, to some degree, and obviously those are just a tiny bit of the issues. Obviously there's an awful lot to faith that's to just do with morality and kindness and the way we treat our fellow human and generosity and lots of loving, wonderful things about it. But ultimately, because that faith was stripped out of the education system in that way, it wasn't really there anymore. It meant that parents with children who they really wanted to uphold their faith and culture were kind of left in a very difficult position, where they sent their kids to school, but there's a big risk that actually the curriculum was talking against their faith and combating it.
Right. There's a whole saying about, I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but like, don't be surprised if you send your kids to Caesar when they come back Romans.
Yes.
And I think that was all about the government, not Caesar specifically, but like,
Yeah.
if the government is educating them, don't be surprised when they come back
Yeah.
believing what they've learned.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of kids will end up kind of believing their teacher over their parents, or they will start to get other ideas. And we can all believe what we believe about that and what we feel is
Yeah.
important around this. But that ultimately, a family that have got faith as the core part of their ideological beliefs is that actually that's not okay. And it makes it so that child is left confused and possibly unsure about who's right and who's wrong and which is fact, all the rest of it. And we, as I say, we can all believe what we need to believe about whether that's something which we want to believe. But ultimately, people have a right to have a religion, and they have a right to have beliefs and faith and culture. And much like what Chris was talking about last week, culture gets lost if kids go to school a lot of the time,
Yeah.
but they get assimilated into a new culture. And actually, if you want to have a strong family culture and a strong family beliefs and ideological beliefs and values, then actually that's an important part of home education, is allowing people to have that. So I just think that's kind of, to touch on that, that's basically what I want to kind of really say
Yeah.
on this, really, is that we have still got to respect it. And we've got to actually respect that actually it's a really beautiful thing that families are working so hard to try and raise good humans who, let's face it, most faith-based families are doing so because they want to raise really good humans, people who really
Yes.
care about others and the community and are very supportive of each other and loving and kind. And that is really what faith is all about for a lot of people, is that.
I was just in Dublin last weekend and was touring some of the churches there. And one of the comments that was made is how people nowadays don't go to church. And so they're
Mm,
having to sell these churches off to other faiths and other cultures that are coming in. Like one of them, I think, turned into a Polish church. It used to be C of E. Before that, it was Catholic, right? So these churches have such a rich history because they've actually changed as the times have changed.
mm,
And I think it's something that we need to also remember too about how home education, at least in the States, started off very religious.
mm-hmm,
And it still sort of has that incorrect association with it because of how it started, that it's just this very extreme religious spin. And I'm actually loving that it is morphed into something that all cultures and religious beliefs and faiths can come to.
mm-hmm.
It's not just one thing anymore.
No.
And we are seeing such diversification. But if we don't honor those individuals who are following what they believe is best for them and their children, then we are going to lose this diversity.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be something that I follow, but I'm really glad that there are people out there that are doing that, that
Mm.
are home educating because they want to have a really rich faith-based life. I think that's amazing. It lets my children see a different way of being.
Yeah.
It lets them decide if that's something, whether all or none or some of what they're seeing is something they wanted to incorporate into their own life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we just have to be mindful of the different angles and approaches that people take to home education,
Yeah.
especially as it comes to faith, because it is such a huge part of our past as humans.
Yes. And some of the moral teaching as well. I think there is a risk.
100%.
There's an awful
Yeah.
lot of religion that's all about kind of like trying to help children to be compassionate and be aware of others and all the rest
Yes.
of it. And I think we recently read Planet Omar with the
Oh,
kids, and
yeah.
it's about a Muslim boy who moves to a new area, and they start in a school and they immediately start receiving sort of hate and prejudice, racism, etc. But also people kind of fearful of the fact that they're Muslim, etc. And it's a brilliant book. It's funny, it's
Mm,
engaging, it addresses compassion, like he's dealing with a bully, and the way that he deals with it in the end is so compassionate and understanding, and ultimately helps to
yeah.
kind of win people over and help them to understand that like the whole point of like the religion is actually to do with this kind of really kind of beautiful kindness towards others. And they had a really great bit in it about how a person is only beautiful if they think beautiful thoughts, that
Oh,
beauty
I
isn't
love that.
actually on the outside, that somebody could be really gorgeous, but they won't be beautiful unless they think beautiful thoughts. And
Mm,
oh God, I loved it so much. It's such a lovely way of looking at things. And we're genuinely kind of adopting it to some degree. I love that idea. And so actually by reading that book, not only has obviously helped them to grasp the concept of another religion, but also the prejudice that people can receive from having them. But ultimately, the point is that a lot of the time, those people are just working really hard to be really good people, and they just want to, like, yeah, their individual festivals and foods and ideas and beliefs can have these really lovely learnings and sort of things within it that we can all benefit from. We don't have to necessarily believe in their God, and we certainly don't have to follow their traditions or routines, but we can certainly like respect it and enjoy it and see that it's got beauty to it, right? So I think this is the thing. It's just trying to have
Yeah.
that kind of open-mindedness.
Yeah. I'm currently working on a unit study for my kids, like a kind of like a book study around the book When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit. And it's about a family who leaves right before Hitler comes into power,
Hmm.
and they end up in the UK. And it just approaches from a child's point of view, World War II, basically. I just love the approach of this from a child's perspective because I've been really struggling about incorporating. So, to back up, I grew up in New Jersey in an area that had a lot of Jewish families. And I kind of grew up very aware of the Jewish community and the holidays. And a lot of our friends and family friends were Jewish. And so I had just such an instant awareness of a very different culture who doesn't believe in Christmas and
Mm-hmm.
Santa and all of that.
Yeah.
And I think that I really loved that aspect of my youth. And I wanted my children to have some of that, but we just don't have very many Jewish families around us right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we were kind of talking about in earlier episodes, like noticing what is lacking from our community and what can we do to bring that in. So I thought that finding an approach to the Jewish faith that my kids could be interested in and kind of understand could obviously come from literature. And so that's where we found this book. And it's something that I haven't read with them yet. I'm just working on how we're going to put it together and how I'm going to introduce it. But I'm hoping that it can kind of coincide with Hanukkah time and we can read about it. We haven't done much on World War II. So it'll be sort of a slight introduction to that
Mm-hmm.
in a really approachable way for like a 9 and 11-year-old who don't need
Yeah.
to maybe have the full experience of World War II.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm hoping that this again just kind of brings in a faith approach and is really important to understand because
Yeah.
it's just another religion that's out there and our
Yeah.
world is richer for it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I want us to have some exposure.
Yeah. And it's, as I say, it's fun for them too, right? To kind of see the difference in people and the different ideas and beliefs they have. I mean, my son, for example, I'm not sure what the religion would technically be, but he said he believes in all the ancient Greek gods and all the rest of it, that he's going to pray to Thor and not Thor, sorry, that's Viking, Poseidon and Zeus, etc. So
Yeah,
sorry, we've been doing a lot of crossover lately and my brain's muddling them all up now. But
tell
yeah,
me
he's
about
like
it.
absolutely obsessed. And like we were talking about Halloween the other day, and he was just like, "Oh, I think Hecate was the goddess of Halloween." And we looked into it, and actually, she wasn't originally, but she's been attached to it over time. And it's actually the Celts who came up with all that stuff. Anyway, but they like it provides these moments of conversation and curiosity and links and opportunity for storytelling and for considering why people honored these gods and why they believed in them and why they prayed to them and why they whatever and what the reasons for that were, like in their history, etc. It's so fascinating.
It's
And
fascinating.
it does create a lot of like understanding of like how people have developed scientific understanding over time and how like they maybe wouldn't have had that understanding then, so they were praying to someone because they were genuinely scared that sun was never going to come back or whatever, right? Like
Right,
that there
right.
was lots of reasons for this stuff, so it makes for great conversation and helps to give that rich understanding of human development as well, because we are very spiritual. We're one of
Absolutely.
very few creatures that are spiritual, and it's an innate part of being human. So
It
it's
is. It
important.
is.
Yeah. So kind of like moving on from this one, I guess. You've also got the concept of political views. Now, this one is always fun, but you have got a bit of this going on at the minute, especially. It's something which I think we just have to be mindful of, which is this concept of when you start home educating, I think, unless it isn't always the first door that gets opened for you, but for me, I think it was maybe the second. The first was recognizing that diet culture was a myth, and that the action of actively trying to lose weight was essentially a recipe for gaining weight later, and that scientifically, all of the people who knew that was just selling you stuff to try and make you lose weight. But anyway, that was my first door, and the first way I started to ask lots of questions and start to recognize that the fabric of fact that was woven around us wasn't always a fact. And home education has obviously been a massive, like it like blew the doors way apart into starting to ask questions about our government and the agenda behind schooling and medicine and socioeconomic status and the economy and all of the things, and essentially how the whole construct of the world is. And my goodness, it is a rabbit hole. And I promised myself I was never going to go too far into this, because at the time, all I could think about, when I first started out in home education especially, all I could really think about was simply how scared I was that I was going to get got at by the social services for trying to choose to do
Oh,
something different
yeah.
for my family. Like, absolutely
Yeah.
terrified that I was like stepping outside the bounds of what was allowed. I was being rebellious. I was being naughty. And that somebody was going to crack down on me and I was going to be in so much trouble. Basically, it sounds silly. And I laugh now because I'm I'm still a little nervous, I've got to be honest. But I'm ultimately now at the point where I don't I obviously realize that it's silly. And I don't need to be that stressed. That for the most part, most people will experience home education without having too much prejudice aimed at them from the local authority. However, that the point of this kind of political kind of concept is that actually home educators do become quite political, because we are people who have quite literally taken a big stand against the government's power over our children's lives. Taking school out of our children's educational trajectory and journey essentially is a big no, stop sign to the government. And it does naturally incline people to become more political. It encourages you to want to fight for it a little bit more, to actually understand how you can try and actually defend it. And obviously we are in a position of having to defend it with the government right now. Like, the government is trying to put more pressure on the home educating community. But what I have found is that the guilt that comes with not being able to understand fully what's going on with the home educating community, because you're new to it maybe, or because you're not particularly
Yeah.
politically minded. Maybe you don't even believe in what the home ed community believe in. Maybe you do believe that there should be some more kind of important steps in place for home educators, that maybe you do actually believe that we should be monitored more closely. Like, we're all entitled to our beliefs, and ultimately our beliefs come from lived experience. If you have maybe come from a family, so I know someone, for example, who was abused as a child, and their parents weren't brilliant with them, obviously, but her aunt home educated her children, but she was not a very nice person. And that ultimately she saw her cousins in a not very nice situation, being treated quite badly by their parent, and her only safe place was school. She had social services checking in with them every 2 weeks. Like, they had a very, very difficult upbringing. And ultimately she therefore has some opinions that actually, yes, like, home educators should have to jump through some hoops. That actually you're sitting there going, no, I don't want anybody looking at my house. No, I don't want anybody talking to me. No, I don't want to have to meet with anybody. But actually, maybe you should, because like, some kids might genuinely be hidden away, not be being taken very good care of. And so, of course, she's got her experiences. And actually, I find it very difficult to argue with that, because she has witnessed firsthand what can happen if a child is not well cared for. And ultimately, that obviously, we know that home education in and of itself is not a safeguarding issue. I 100% believe that we already have safeguarding things in place for children, that ultimately there are already laws in place. And I don't agree that we should have further monitoring, myself personally, so before anybody lynches me. However, I can understand and I can have compassion with why people may believe that this is the case. And when you think the government, even to have some compassion for the government, they are dealing with the worst case scenarios, right? They are dealing with all the stuff that goes wrong. They see it all. Like, they see all of the horrors and the stuff that happens.
Yeah. So you're going to be jaded.
Yeah, you're going to want to crack down on it. You're going to want to get more control. It's a bit like a parent who's dealing with, like, I don't know, behavioral issues where your kids are like constantly stepping over a boundary. At some point, you're going to try and crack down on it, right? You're going to start to think, I need to put some more control in place here because everything's just going to pot. And so I can see how this kind of overreach and the need to control comes into effect. I can understand how it happens. I'm not okay with it, and we absolutely should fight for our rights, and it's a slippery slope, and so we do need to fight for it. But I can see how some people, A, don't agree with it. Some people are confused and don't really know which side to go down. Some people are extremely passionate about it and will fight to the death over this subject. And ultimately, that level of passion can come with exclusion, frustration, anger towards other groups. Another example is allowing the local authority to come to your home to have a visit. I have got a couple of friends who are single parents who have allowed a visit. Why? because they want to have some evidence when they're going through custody battles, they're dealing with difficult exes. They need to have some evidence. And that is one of the best ways to get it, is to say, yes, our education provision is suitable and great, and our children are safe and healthy and well, and there's nothing to worry about here. To have that literal sign off from a local authority massively helps in the court proceedings. It just does. And I think we can easily judge someone choosing to do that and be like, come on, we're all supposed to be taking a stand. Nobody's supposed to accept a visit from the local authorities. You have to all just get everything done in writing. Otherwise, they start to take more liberties. But ultimately, some of us are going to feel safe and secure in not doing that. And some of us are not. And some of us need to do it differently. Or we'll have a different opinion. Some people might be dyslexic and writing a report is horrendous. Some people might find that really stressful to the point of it genuinely burning them out. And writing a report is just too scary and too hard. And so for them, it does feel more appropriate for them to do it that way. And I guess it's just trying to understand that whilst we can try and encourage people to approach things in a universal way, and for us to support them in doing so, ultimately, people need to be able to make a choice that's right for their family. And we certainly should not be judging them or angry with them for choosing otherwise. Like, we've got to allow people to be people. Sometimes they've got to make a choice that's right for them. And sure, like, if it's coming from a place of they didn't know or they didn't realize, and you want to just gently try and encourage them to understand your perspective, you can have a polite conversation with someone, but within reason. Like, you don't have the right to just shove your beliefs down their throat. If they don't want to do it that way, that's okay. Like, they're allowed to make those choices.
I think a lot of the politics comes into play, not from like Democrat or Republican or all the parties you guys have here that I still don't understand.
Nor do we, actually.
To me, it just is like, I'm like, okay.
It's a lot of nonsense.
But it from like being political and then the lack of interest. Like, I think when it comes to like you're saying, a lot of the politics here around home education is still being decided, or is potentially going to change, whereas it feels much more solid in Italy. Shocking. Never thought I would say that. And in America. So I feel like the anxiety around home education here is something I feel where I never felt that once I understood the system. I never felt that in Italy, and I certainly don't feel it in the States. So I think that there's a lot of push here to read up on the reports, read up on the bills, find this, I don't even know what you call it, like petition to not put this bill into law, right? So all of that can be very overwhelming, and also feel like you're sort of putting your name out there to potentially have some
very triggering
backlash,
as
or
well.
also feels potentially scary.
It
And
does.
so I think that that alone creates like a lack of political interest or political action. And so, whereas I'm saying this to say, like, when we talk about politics, I don't think we're saying like, oh, the Republicans are over here and the Democrats are over here and the independents are over here, and we don't socialize because we fight over, whoever's in
sort of
power or
basic
whatever their
fundamental
belief
beliefs.
is. Exactly. I do think that is the case in America. I absolutely think you have people who are very happy with the current government and people who are not. And that can absolutely cause some rifts between homeschool groups.
Very strong.
Right. Whereas here in England, I feel like it is a being political versus not being political. And like people saying, please go sign this because we don't want this bill to pass. And people are like, oh, gosh, I don't know if I really even want to get involved. I'm just trying to stay in my lane. I'm just trying to homeschool my kids. Right. I'm trying to put food on the table and pay the electric bill, like with this, current economy. And I can't get involved in that. And I'll just deal with whatever comes if and when it happens. And
It can be very
so I
triggering
think,
and scary too, right? Like, it's very overwhelming.
absolutely. Yeah. So just being compassionate for those that maybe don't want to get involved in a political sense, is something to just keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that is the thing. I definitely felt that sense. If I sent the letter to my local MP and I suddenly had this instant panic of, oh my goodness, like,
God,
are they just going to instantly give
be...
this to, like, are they going to start like attacking me for it and all the rest of it? And I was like, no, it's okay. Like, they actually have got a responsibility not to share that data. Like, that's, it's not confidential exactly, but like they would be in trouble if it's data sharing, basically. They wouldn't be allowed to just pass your details across. But it's, yeah, it's not fun and it's stressful, but again, I can understand when people are fighting so hard for our freedoms that they maybe would find apathy or disinterest, or they would see that as apathy or disinterest rather, or someone who's just like, I just can't deal with this right now, or whatever, as being like, oh, come on, please just send a letter to your MP. Please just join the fight. Like, we need every single person. There's not enough of us to fight this as it is. Like, please, can you jump on board? And I can understand where that passion comes from, but I guess it's saying it's okay to be passionate. It's okay to try and encourage others to fight for what we believe in, but it is not okay to judge a person because they have chosen to abstain from a fight, or because they don't have the
Exactly.
capacity, or because they have got to approach things slightly differently for their family for very many different reasons. And ultimately,
Exactly.
we just need to be mindful of where the feelings are coming from. Like, where is it coming from a place of compassion and understanding, or is it coming from a place of like anger, frustration towards our fellow human? Like, let's try and pull together, and by providing support and love to someone who's had to make a different decision, actually you're more likely to get that person to eventually want to talk to you about this stuff and want to get involved in the fight if they feel supported by the community as a whole and respected as an individual for making their own choices. Because then it allows for more conversations to happen. It allows us to actually, if you get to know that person and the reason why they made their choices, then actually that might amend how you are dealing with the local authorities and say, okay, I can understand that you as a local authority might be wanting to control because of this, but actually we need you to understand why this isn't okay and why you need to approach this differently. It actually bolsters your arguments. It helps you to understand the depth that much more, because otherwise you are just trying to kind of beat the same drum constantly, and actually getting some other perspectives and other reasons why these things might be happening allows you to obviously have a stronger argument and to help you to fight back even better. So embrace the individuals who are not necessarily falling into the same political views as you, understand why, get to know what's going on with them, and hopefully it will help you to actually even fight those battles harder. What else haven't we covered yet? So I think we're kind of reaching a point of kind of having talked through most of it now. But I guess I suppose there's also like the element of sort of socioeconomic and cultural prejudice that does sometimes fall into home education. So we'll touch on that briefly as well. I know this one's getting to be quite a long one, but kind of this kind of concept that socioeconomic wise, so families maybe with more resources, able to afford more trips or extracurriculars, etc. But also you've got things like cultural background. So somebody coming from a different part of the UK, or coming from a different sort of socioeconomic background. So somebody who isn't as wealthy or has obviously struggled to get kind of certain levels of grades in school, there are going to be some elements of judgment, and we have got to be really mindful of this. And also the kind of concept around even things like dietary choices, like veganism, and the choices to eat meat, for example, is another great one. Like, in the home educating community, we can have some of these factions and divides. And you know what, as human beings, it is okay again for us all to be different, and for us to have our different beliefs or likes and dislikes, and things that we are able to afford or not able to afford, or even things we prioritize. Because whilst some people may be able to afford certain things, they may actually want to prioritize something else. So I know, for example, this happens a lot. You see this sometimes where you're having a conversation with someone about kind of like, I don't know, for example, we have recently managed to get our money back on track. Last year was hell on a plate. And when money finally got back on track for me, I booked us a holiday. And whilst some might look at that and think, really? Like, you're not just going to put that in savings, or you're not going to put it towards something really boring and important and all the rest of it. I was like, do you know what? I have done that with an awful lot of the money that's come through to us recently that we've managed to make happen. And I have been saving and putting it towards important stuff. But I am also going to have some fun with it. And that for us is a priority. Like, travel is a priority, culture is a priority, stuff for our kids like that is a priority. And so I want to give them an opportunity to go see somewhere else and do something different, and to have a bit more of a magical Christmas. And for me, that felt important this year. I felt like we've had a tough couple of years, and it was something nice to go do that entertains us. However, you do find yourself then, like, when you're talking to people and actually they're like, God, we haven't been on a holiday in years. And like, you start to feel a bit guilty for it. And you've got to be mindful that all of these moments are possible fodder for people to build prejudice against each other, and for them to be thinking, God, it's nice for you. Like, you get to book a holiday, you get to go and do these amazing things, or you get to have like all of these online classes or whatever it might be. I think even like a friend of mine was talking about horse riding recently and saying how it's such a privilege to let your kids be able to go riding. Most people can't afford that. And like, I just had to just discourage my kids from even getting interested in it because we just can't afford that. I don't want them to get like any ideas in their heads. We can instantly have this kind of like judgment that we feel towards us for prioritizing certain things, and equally the judgment we might have towards somebody else for choosing not to encourage that. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's so easy to have these little even if they're just a flicker of judgment towards somebody for their choices. And like, especially for example, if you are in a hard place and you have not got a lot of money right now and you're really struggling to make ends meet, for somebody to be like, oh yeah, we just had a bit of a treat the other day, like we booked these tickets to go to this place, but actually we decided we just couldn't bother to go that day. It wasn't that much, it was only £10 each for a ticket, so it's no big deal, like we'll just book something else now instead. And it's just like, so you just like wasted 50 quid on like just didn't fancy going. Like you can instantly have that like, seriously,
Yes.
like that's crazy. And then at the same time, you got to remember that they're allowed to make a decision about how they spend their money. Like that's okay. Like that's up to them to do how they want to do things, and that we
Yeah.
can't. We've just got to be really mindful of this stuff. Like we don't have to all be the same, and we certainly don't have to all approach home education the same way. And there's an
Yeah.
awful lot of bias in all of this thing. So wealth is a big one for a lot of kind of typical working middle families. They are going to have some prejudices around money. My dad's comments about people who have money all of my life just ring in my head, bless him. It's very interesting how these things can sometimes stick with you if you don't work on trying to eradicate them. And so it's just being mindful of that again, I guess, when you're talking to friends or you're seeing what they're up to, or you're seeing how much money they have or the house they have or the resources they're getting, or you're comparing yourself to them. And this judgment isn't necessarily even always negative towards that person. It can sometimes be towards yourself. And this kind of prejudice that you then have towards your own, like you start being negative about who you are and what you've achieved and what you're capable of, because you're kind of comparing yourself to others. And so there's that as well. It's like being mindful of who you are, and being kind to yourself around that as well. But yeah, I feel like I've gone on a bit of a rambly tangent on this one now.
It's a very far-reaching one, isn't it? Because I remember when I was living with a very serious boyfriend at the time in my late 20s, we were going on a vacation and I was going through like all the packing and I was like, I don't know if I, need this and what if I don't need that? And maybe I should bring this, but then, my suitcase is going to be heavy and just trying to make those final decisions of like what was making the cut and what wasn't. And he finally said to me, if you need it and you haven't brought it, we'll just buy it. Like, this is such a silly conversation to be having right now. Like, just finish packing your bag. And if something comes up and you need something, you'll just buy it. And I was thinking to myself, what? Like, if I have a perfectly good can of hairspray at home and I
Mm,
don't bring it with me, I'm not buying a new hairspray on the trip. Like, that's
mm,
just, I've forgotten it and that's that. I'm like, then that's a waste of money, right? Like, it was just such a shock to me that this was his perspective. And I was thinking about this at the time, like, oh gosh, well, also, I could just do that. Like,
mm,
just because my parents would have never done that for us when we were traveling growing up.
mm.
If you didn't have something on the trip, it's not like my mom said, "Oh yeah, go here's $20. Go figure it out." Like, no, like
Yeah.
that was it. If you forgot it, you forgot it. If you didn't bring your flip-flops, well then you walked on that beach in shoes. Like, that was the way it was. And so it was just this different mentality of that. And I was like, gosh, like to me, that was so shocking. But
Mm,
he was an only child and his parents probably had a different perspective than mine. I was one of four. We can't buy everyone
yeah.
flip-flops. So it was just one of these things where the number of children, the types of jobs you have, what
Mm,
you've worked for versus been given potentially
yeah.
in family money or houses. I know in Italy, for example, the houses are passed down very often through the generations. And so it is very possible that either you or the person you marry has a family home that you live in.
Mm,
And so you have zero home payments.
yeah, it's
That is,
amazing.
could you imagine not having a mortgage to pay? That is
Mm,
amazing. What freedom, what liberties. Yes, then of course you can take that really lovely vacation to Greece for 3 weeks every year while your company is closed in August, as so many of them do in Italy. Like, that's an amazing lifestyle,
it
but
is.
it's not a reality for most of the rest of us over here.
Mm,
I think like those things matter. And, talking about, when you're mentioning horse riding, like that is a huge expense for us because I have 3 children and it is like the most expensive sport hobby out there. I think second to like ice hockey,
Mm,
or I guess ice hockey is second to equestrian. So,
mm,
all that to be said, I actually made a comment one time that we felt very stretched because we were doing so many things, which is such a common thing with home education. You can join and do all these activities, and then suddenly you're doing all these activities, you're never home.
mm,
And so I was trying to feel out like where we could pull back a little bit, what my kids really wanted to lean into, and if we could make some changes to our schedule that would allow us a little more time at home. Because I think we all sort of get burnt out if we're on that constant go, go, go and not having the appropriate time to like just relax and do our like homeschool thing. So I talked about how I was going to pull back from a lot of these activities that were wonderful, nothing wrong with them, but just weren't necessarily something we could afford from a financial and time perspective at the moment.
mm,
And so there was this family that made a comment to me like, oh my gosh, but then what will you be doing? You'll be doing nothing. Like,
mhm,
I don't understand how you feel okay with that. Like, it was just such a different divide. So it was almost like a judgment based on one, just a misunderstanding of our financial capacity to continue to live this lifestyle. And
mm.
two, almost like a different perspective in what home education to them maybe meant doing a lot of the things outside the home.
Yeah,
Whereas, like, for me, I was in that moment trying to spend more quality time with my children and stop sending them out to all these other things that were, stressing us from a get out of the house perspective. But
yeah,
also a financial perspective, and then also just like some days we want to stay in our pajamas. Like, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So, and we need to build that in. We need to have time and space for that in our
Mm,
day. So there are a lot of different ways that a financial, but also like a background from that, like your
yeah,
upbringing can play
yeah.
into how you perceive things should be.
Yeah, and, like, whether or not you got to experience a lot of extracurriculars as a child or whether or not you really
Exactly.
valued that even, and I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely didn't do an awful lot of them. My parents definitely tried to sign us up for the odd thing, but we didn't tend to stick at them particularly long, whether for financial
Mm,
reasons or otherwise, I'm not really sure. But ultimately, that wasn't really something I hugely valued. I did value my time at home and my chance to draw and colour and play and be out on the streets with my friends and just explore and just be me and all the rest of it. And so I think we can, like, these things are just sometimes just our own personal values and our own, the things that we really loved. And actually,
yeah.
we sometimes will even think, I mean, I have definitely found myself thinking, I won't bother signing my kids up for that. They just won't be engaged with it. But then actually, like, we'll just give it a try because I'll be like, no, you don't just get to make that decision. You have no idea. Like, give them a chance to see what happens. And actually, they'll really enjoy it. And I'm just like, oh, interesting. Like, I wasn't expecting them to do that or whatever. It's been really important sometimes to really address these thoughts, that the initial feelings we might have towards something, and to question it and to just challenge it a little bit. And whilst it's okay to have values and beliefs and ideologies, like, at the end of the day, where we are saying here that it's good to have them, that we want you to have them, that people should be individuals, that from individuality comes innovation and ideas and wisdom and lots and lots of amazing things. But what we do have to be mindful of, that it's not what we need to start championing, is this concept of individuality being a good thing. Being different is good. Being weird is good. Being like an othered outsider, and having very different perspectives and views on things is good, but we need more of it. And we need to see it in each other as a positive attribute, that people having that ability to critically think and see the world and do something differently and choose something intentionally for their family is all good. All of that is good. And whilst it's important for people to consider their sources, consider their prejudices, consider their biases, consider their beliefs and their ideologies, and trying to make sure that within those values, they have the ability to respect and have compassion for others. Ultimately, this concept of individuality is super important, and it allows us to have this incredible, growing, diverse human culture that it would not exist. We would not have all of the technology and the concepts and the ideas and the books and the stories and the religions and the beautiful
Yeah.
stuff that we all really value as part of being human, cultural and spiritual and interesting and knowledgeable and intellectual and all of the things. Those things would not exist if individual humans didn't have these intense fascinations with random things that other people did not. And
Right.
didn't challenge
Exactly.
stuff and didn't ask questions and push beliefs and push boundaries. Like, this stuff is vital for human growth, and it is being squashed in our society. We are being forced into this like sausage factory of like everyone must conform to this precise measurement, and it doesn't work, and people are not happy, and mental health is a massive crisis point right now. Physical health is a crisis point. Nothing is being well
Yeah.
cared for. Human beings are not humaning enough, and the more we allow human beings to human, the happier we are. And one of the most beautiful things about the home education community is this opportunity for humans to human, and the more we allow it, and the more dismissive we get of these ideas of judging and critiquing each other and comparing yourselves to each other and being cruel to ourselves and having that negative self-talk and that negative talk
Yeah.
towards others, and the more of that we embrace, the more enriched our community becomes, and the more open and accessible it feels to new people coming into it, and the more welcoming it becomes as well, and ultimately allows us all to actually grow and to really benefit each other, and to provide these really lovely spaces that makes us feel safe and seen for who we actually are, instead of some fake version that we think everybody wants to see.
Yeah.
I hope this episode has been as powerful for you as I feel like it has been for us. I've definitely enjoyed talking through it. But if you've got any other thoughts, if there's anything else that you feel like we've missed, any kind of other things that you see coming up, let us know, and we can talk about it on social media as well around this episode. But yeah, sorry, this is a bit of a long one. Hopefully, I think it's worth it though. I think it's been a good chat, and I hope that you guys think the same thing.
Yeah.
Have
Just
a
so much
lovely
to
week.
say.
So much to say. Such an interesting subject. So anyway, have a lovely week, guys, and we will see you again next time.
You've been listening to the Big Home Ed Conversations podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Big Home Ed Podcast for updates. We'll be back again next week for another episode, but don't forget to send us your questions, comments, and personal experiences on the topics we'll be covering this season. Visit our blog, linked in the show notes, for a reminder of the topics, or just message us directly on Instagram or TikTok. Thanks, everyone. Take care.